Intelligence High School Debate.
Hello and welcome to Intelligence High School Debate. I'm your host, Seo Mi-sorang. Now, people say that life is akin to a marathon and that you need to persevere and stay focused until the very end. Well, I hope our students competing today will stay focused and give it their best shot as they compete for a chance at the semi-finals of this debate tournament. But first, let's check out the rules of this debate.
This tournament adapts the British parliamentary style. The debate consists of 4 teams of 2 speakers with 2 teams on either side of the case. Each speaker should deliver a 5-minute speech, and teams gain points individually even if on the same side. The first and last minute of each speech is protected from the point of information.
Time now to meet our students. Teams and sides are chosen by drawing lots, so each team, please randomly select a scroll. It will have your team position written on it. Now, first up are the students from ChungAng University High School, 10th graders Daeil and Lee Se-hoon. They have chosen opening government. And next up are the 11th graders Moon Ga-bin and Kim Jun-sik from Daeil Foreign Language High School. Please select a scroll. They have chosen closing government. And continuing on, Gwacheon Foreign Language High School students, 12th graders Choi Hae-ryung and Hyun Yu-jin. Please select a scroll. The scroll reads closing opposition. And that, of course, means that Goyang Global High School students, 11th graders Kim Gang-hyun and Kim Yu-rim, will be assuming the position opening opposition. Here are your teams once again on opening government. We have students from ChungAng University High School.
We're very happy to be here. We're very nervous, but we will try our best to do.
And on opening opposition, students from Goyang Global High School.
Hello, we're from Goyang Global High School. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you for having us. We promise that we'll give it our best shot.
Thank you. And on closing government, students from Daeil Foreign Language High School.
Hello, we're from Daeil Foreign Language High School, and we promise you the best debate.
And on closing opposition, students from Gwacheon Foreign Language High School.
Hello, we're from Gwacheon Foreign Language High School, and it's such an honor to be here.
Okay, those were your 4 teams. Now let's meet our 3 adjudicators. First, we have Professor Joshua Park, who is a member of the Executive Committee of the World Schools Debating Championships. Next, we have Professor Kang Yong-seung from Yonsei University Law School. And we're also joined by Professor Jan Gallis from the Philippines, who is the director of the Asian Debate Institute. And last but not least, we are joined by 50 audience judges, students from the Seongnam Foreign Language High School. Welcome to our show. Now, our audience judges will give continuous feedback in the form of green lights. They will turn the green lights on when they agree with the speaker. All right, enough from me. Let's check out the motion for today's debate.
An increasing number of teenagers are committing violent crimes, with an even more alarming rate of reoffenders. One possible way of prevention is to enhance punishment and expose their personal information and criminal records just like adults. However, some are opposed, citing a need to protect the futures of juvenile offenders. Should juvenile felons be persecuted just like adults to maintain a safe, peaceful society? This House would persecute juvenile felons as adults.
Juvenile crimes are on the rise, and some juveniles commit crimes in full knowledge of the fact that they're too young to be fully prosecuted by the law. Does this mean that we need to start prosecuting juvenile felons as adults? Will this lower juvenile crime rates? Let's hear from our students. First, the Prime Minister. Please step up to the podium.
Hello, I'm the Prime Minister of the Open Government. Some juvenile felonies are occurred with intelligent methodology and their methods are getting increasingly brutal. For example, at 2015, there was a crime a teenager making a teenage girl insensible and tried to rape her. Thankfully, other people saw it, so the offender could not succeed. The teenage girl had a concussion, but the juvenile court said the offender is examining himself and he is only 18 years old. So they prosecuted him with a weak punishment. Does this sound like a plan that came out from an immature person? Not to us. Juvenile delinquents are committing crimes with the meticulous plans, and we shouldn't consider them as children. We need to focus on the crime, not the age. The juvenile courts have a strong tendency to only focus on the age of the offender rather than the actual nature and reason for the crime that they committed. Just because they are teenagers doesn't mean that they should be punished as they committed misdemeanor and give second chances. We need to bring justice to crimes. If we give them a second chance, they could do a crime again. Without a strong sentence, how could we stop the teenagers' crime? Thank you.
Okay, you have 3 minutes and 20 seconds left. Would you like to answer some POIs, or would you like to finish there?
Okay, I'll answer POIs.
Okay, does anyone have point of information for the Prime Minister?
Point?
Okay.
Don't you think it is the same thing that when the adults get the second chance, it is also hard to prevent another crimes by the adults? What is the special characteristic of the juvenile crime that they cannot be given the second chance?
Well, adults can consider what they should do better than teenagers. But teenagers don't. So adults need to help teenagers to think better and what to do. Yeah.
Does anyone else have POIs? No? Okay, you can step down. Thank you. That was the Prime Minister arguing for the motion, so arguing that juveniles should be prosecuted as adults when they commit a crime. One of the issues raised was that not giving adequate punishment can lead to secondary criminal acts. All right, so how successful was he in persuading our audience? 1 of 50 audience judges agree with the Prime Minister. Let's see if our next speaker can do better. Leader of Opposition, it's your turn.
Honorable judges, opponents, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Goyang Kim, the leader of the opposition. The motion set before the House today is this House should prosecute juvenile felons as adults. We, the opposition, strongly stand against the motion. Before we start, I'd like to define the term juvenile, as it's the key term of today's debate. I define the term as adolescents under the age of 14 who are protected as criminal minors, as adolescents between the age of 15 to 19 are punished by the criminal law. Now, before starting with our arguments, I'd like to refute what the previous speaker, the government Prime Minister, had said. My first question is if the government Prime Minister is underestimating the hope for reformation. And second is that the government Prime Minister is doing a hasty generalization of every adolescents and juvenile criminals committing felonies are same, because some are based on imitation or somebody is doing without noticing it. Now I would like to start with our arguments. Among 4 arguments, I would like to present 2 arguments. Our first argument is that the juvenile criminals are more likely to commit more crimes if they're treated as adults. In the case of which juvenile criminals are put together with seasoned criminals, they are likely to end up becoming involved in gangs or other crime activities as they're still impressionable. Some people may say this problem can be solved with facilities like juvenile jails, a facility made to separately accommodate the juvenile criminals and adult criminals. However, they're too young to reform their behaviors and realize what they committed was wrong, even being sent to jails or being given the same level of punishment as adults. it's seen by the fact that the reoffending rate of juvenile criminals is very high, though they're sent to juvenile jails. According to the criminal analysis of Supreme Public Prosecutor's Office, the reoffending rate of juvenile criminals is more than a half, proving that it's an efficient measure to accommodate them in jails. Thus, even though adolescents are sent to jails with some same level of punishment as adults, it's of no use, and it's more efficient to educate and reform them to help them grow up as healthy citizens. And our team's second argument is that sending them to jails only rids juvenile criminals of hope. By giving extremely hard sentences, it gives the impression to students that there is no hope for the future and no hope of them ever becoming anything but a criminal and a convict. Though it's obvious that we shouldn't turn a blind eye to those who committed a crime, a felony, regardless of the age. However, considering that they still have years to live, that they aren't fully developed to make rational decisions, it's better to reform them, to help them reform and learn what's right or wrong rather than giving them harsh sentences. So, in conclusion, it is obvious that juvenile criminals should be punished regardless of their age because it's the way they learn the social responsibility for what they committed. However, they shouldn't be considered as same as adults, for their brain isn't fully developed to make rational and right decisions and acknowledge the severity of crime they committed. Thank you for listening. I yield my time.
Does anyone want to raise points of information? No? Okay, you may step down. Oh, you have? All right.
So you said like people won't have any chance and any hopes, right? Well, I think it's the same for the people in the 20s. Like they get the same sentence, but...
However, I said that the juvenile criminals are young, and the criminals above the age of 20 are fully developed, so they can make rational decisions. However, the juvenile criminals under the age of 19 or 14, they're too young to have some kind of, to acknowledge that their crime was very wrong.
Isn't that like a subjective, wait, sorry, excuse me. Isn't that a subjective point of view?
We're now in protected time, so please sit down. Okay. All right, you may step back down. That was the leader of opposition arguing the government should not prosecute juvenile felons as adults. According to the speaker, doing so would, among other things, not give a second chance to the juveniles, and that sending juveniles to jails leads to high rates of recidivism. Okay, so did he do a better job than the Prime Minister who received 1 light? I think he did. Let's find out how many lights have been switched on. 33 out of 50, so over 60% of our audience agree. All right, let's move on to the Deputy Prime Minister. Please step up to the podium.
Hi everyone, I'm the Deputy Prime Minister of Opening Government. Before I start my presentation, I just want to say that I want to continue that that's just a subjective point of view, and also he said juvenile delinquents would perform more crimes if they go to the same jail. Well, I think, and you said they will meet gangs and people and relate it to the stuffs. I think it will be the same because if you go to the juvenile jail, you guys can also meet gangs too. I just wanted to say that, so I'll start my presentation. This hat would prosecute juvenile felons as adults. I think, well, there are mainly 2 theories of punishment in criminal law. Retributivism, the purpose of punishment. Retributivism means we need to retribute enough for what they have done. And the purpose of punishment literally means the purpose of punishment. The frequency of young kids committing horrendous crime has been on a steady rise for the 2 decades, which means I think there's a problem with our current policy and we should make a change right there. Giving weak punishment to juvenile delinquents does not fulfill retributivism. Juvenile delinquent can take the advantage of current policy because the current policy thinks we should give less punishment to the people. They already know that they're committing crimes while they're doing so. I think there's a problem with that. It can also reduce the secondary damage to the victims. I think I'm done.
Okay, does anyone have any points of information for the Deputy Prime Minister?
Point. Don't you think for the juveniles, the education and rehabilitation from the government side is much more effective and valuable thing that government have to do rather than the harsh one-time punishment?
Well, currently, I think we are actually doing the educations already in school. Am I right? So, like, we get the lessons of moral of not doing stuff, punishment, getting punished. I think that education we're already doing is not working well. That's why the current frequency of young kids committing horrendous crime is increasing at a steady rise. So I think it's a time to take a great, strong move now.
Okay, would you like to step down?
Yes, stop.
Okay, all right. Okay, there is another point. Would you like to accept that, or?
Sure.
Okay.
You mentioned that the rate of crime, juvenile crime, has been increasing, and it's because of our current system. Well, how do you feel about countries where juveniles are punished the same as adults, and yet the crime rate is still on the rise?
Well, I think. Can you tell me the examples of the countries?
Well, in the U.S., children over the age of 12 are punished almost the same as adults, like almost exactly the same. They go to the same jail and they serve the same sentences, and yet the crime rate of juveniles are still rising.
Well, I have nothing to say about that.
Okay. If no one has other points of information, okay, you may step down. That was the Deputy Prime Minister arguing for the motion, and in detailing why government should prosecute juvenile felons as adults, he mentioned that some juvenile delinquents take full advantage of the fact that they will not get a harsher punishment as adults. Okay, so let's see how many audience judges agree. 25, so exactly half, exactly 50% of our audience judges agree with the Deputy Prime Minister. That means that 26 out of 100 votes were cast for the opening government. Okay, time now for the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Dear honorable judges and fellow debaters, I am Yulim Kim, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, and I'd like to continue the debate. Another reason not to prosecute juvenile felons with the same law as adults is because they are still growing. As we have defined earlier, juvenile teens from the age of 14 to 19 already are punished with the same circumstances as adults. However, those who are younger are still punished under different laws. We see this as necessary. These children mostly live under their parents' roofs, and this clearly shows that they are not fully grown. And they probably do not have a clear understanding of the crime that they have committed. Their brains are not fully developed to understand right from wrong, and while we strongly agree that wrong actions must be punished, we believe that the right measures that can help the child grow are needed rather than a no-hope-at-all kind of system. There is a reason why they are not allowed to vote or have the numerous rights and obligations of an adult. They still lack the many decision-making parts of the brain which needs to be fostered in the right way, and we believe that crime punishment system appropriate for that age level is a must. The fourth reason not to try juveniles in the same way as adults is because punishing juveniles harshly will have little to no effect on potential latent criminals and the adolescent community in general. As we previously mentioned, the U.S. federal laws have been reinstated time and again to lower the age of juvenile crime minors, yet the rate of crime committed by juveniles has been increasing regardless of these new implementations. There are so many other countries around the world who have come to the conclusion to lower their criminal minor age limit and to punish them harshly, and yet they have seen no decline in their criminal rates. I believe that this shows that means of education in the scope of preventing crime before it happens and reforming criminals in the right way afterwards will be the appropriate solution to this problem.
POI, sir. POI, madam.
Oh, yes.
Are you aware that felonies indicate serious crimes such as murder or serious violence?
Yes. I'm sorry, what are you trying to ask?
Are you aware that felonies actually indicate to various serious crimes that are very detrimental to our society? Do you think that can be actually resolved by simple education?
Well, I'm not saying that there should be no punishment for these people. I'm saying that the right punishment for their right age level should be mandatory to help these people who are still young and have so many years to live in their society to reform themselves and, get better education so that they never make these mistakes again. Okay. The true role of any form of punishment is to punish the offender for his or her misdoings and to help them improve to never make the same mistakes again. However, if we punish juveniles with laws that are only meant for punishment, only to serve time for their actions, there can be no hope for these people who will be the next generation. Therefore, we believe that while a stronger juvenile punishment can be necessary, it still needs to be separate from that of an adult so that they can get the proper education and reformation needed in that particular time of their life. Thank you.
Okay, that was the Deputy Leader of Opposition arguing against the motion, and in laying out the reasons for why government should not prosecute juvenile felons as adults, she mentioned that juveniles are emotionally and cognitively immature, and they're incapable of continuously making rational decisions, and therefore should be held to a different standard than adults. Let's see how many lights have been switched on. 37, so that puts the total at 70 out of 100 lights for the opening opposition. The top half of the debate is now complete, but before we move on to the closing teams, let's first ask our three adjudicators on their opinion on the debate so far. Professor Kang Yong-seung.
First of all, I want to commend both sides for doing a wonderful job, and I very much enjoyed the debate. And the opening government team, the PM primarily focused on, I think, explaining why deterrence would not be particularly was not particularly effective right now, and there's a need to enhance it perhaps by reforming the system. Now, both of you left a lot of time remaining, which isn't necessarily a problem, but if you don't use your time, then you're giving up an opportunity to make your points more clearly and to engage more with the issues.
Deputy Leader of Opposition, I would say that it's good that you're elaborating more about the developmental aspects of these juveniles, the stages of the teens' development, and you provide various examples. That said, I'm not going to say that you're providing wrong examples when you're saying the United States is very similarly treating juveniles to adults in terms of crimes. But in many states, or most cases, that's probably not the case, right? So your stance ended up becoming a bit unclear by the end of your speech. So my advice for the opening opposition team as a whole, face the debate head on and argue it in its most natural interpretation, and secondly, make clear what exactly your model of the world is.
I'd like to share two things for both opening teams. One would be the nice things that you've done in this debate, and second, the things that we can improve, okay? So on the first part, I thought both teams were good in terms of framing the debate on what should be the focus of criminal justice system. So both teams were hinting that this is a debate between, retribution versus rehabilitation. So that's nice. But on the second part, in order for us to improve this debate, I think it would be better if we can clearly pronounce that these two things are the trade-off of today's debate. For you to be able to quickly and easily win the debate, you just need to do two things. One is to clearly identify what should be the context of the debate, and second, what would be the principal ideas that would support, your stance. And then, the moment that you just give a lot of practical or consequential arguments, then it would be easily be, concluded also, since everything was already founded, nicely at the very start.
And we now move on to the closing half of this debate. And to start us off, the Member of Government. Please step up to the podium.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, crimes are crimes, and nothing can be an excuse for that, especially age. Even more, the crimes that we're discussing in this debate are felonies, very serious and detrimental to our whole society. In the status quo, the crime rates of juveniles are skyrocketing every day, and we think that our policy can partially resolve this problem in our society. And with that in mind, let me move on to my rebuttals. First, let me point out that prosecution does not mean whether we should give these felons a second chance or not. It's about the process in which we handle these felons, and it's about the way the defendants are treated in court. And therefore, I'd like to again emphasize that we are not talking about whether this policy can give these people a second chance or not, but whether treating juvenile felons and adult felons the same is the correct way to decrease the crime rates in our society. Now, moving on, the opposition leader said that juveniles are likely to end up being criminals in the future, and this method is not effective for the society. But however, I'd like to point out that the opposition leader in this debate today is being very naive, because as I pointed out in my POI in my previous speech, we're talking about felons and we're talking about felonies, and felonies indicate to crimes that are very serious, such as murder and violence that can actually very negatively affect all the innocent people in our society. And this means that the felons that have committed these crimes have already gone beyond the line of being changed through soft methods such as education or rehabilitation. The opposition leader talked as if education could be an effective method to suddenly change and transform these serious criminals' tendencies to commit these very deep crimes. But we think that rather than unconditionally trusting these criminals to suddenly transform themselves, it will be a lot more beneficial to both the society and the felons to show them what law and justice actually means in our society today. Also, I'd like to talk about the maturity that is being discussed in this debate. We think that maturity is cannot be decided according to the person's numerical age, but actually the environment and the mental state of that person. So we think that it is very illogical to say that immaturity is an excuse for the juvenile felons to be excused. I'd like to move on to my two arguments. The first is about society, and the second is about the fairness. First, I'd like to address the problem of juvenile crime rates. By treating these juveniles and adult felons in the same way, the government is able to send out a clear message against crime in the society. They can change the misinterpretations that these juveniles have, and their sense of secureness that their crimes, the punishment for their crimes will be lowered, and that their treatment will be softer than all the adults just because of their age. This is an expressive method to reduce crimes that are rocketing in our society. And also, there are some cases in which the adolescents abuse their rights as a juvenile to commit crimes because they already have in mind that they will not be punished in the same way, in the same severeness that they will be punished if they were adults. Now, I'd like to talk about the promotion of efficiency in the legal process of actually in the court.
Point.
Yes, ma'am.
Don't you think it is also a government's job to rehabilitate the youngsters if the education is successfully adopted?
Yes, but I told you that there is a high chance that the education will not be successful because these felonies that we're talking about are very serious, and the severeness of these crimes have gone beyond the limit of being actually to be handled by a soft education. Now, moving on. If the standards for the adults and the juveniles were separate, it's much harder for the judges of the court to actually consider all the separate elements and the exceptional cases. There is also a high possibility of biased law articles that work unfairly against a certain type of defendant. The time and cost that it takes to apply all these into consideration will not only cause confusion in the court, but it will also lead to unstable and biased verdict. With our policy, these resources would never have to be wasted like this, and they would rather be spent on making more healthy improvements to our society. Now, adding a little more to what I've talked about previously, the plaintiffs, who are the actual people who have been directly affected by the felon's crimes, should be able to reap a verdict and procession of court that depends on the degree of the crime, not the age of the criminal. The plaintiff deserves a fair fulfillment of the law. Law, which is the pillar of everything, should be just. Thank you.
Okay, that was a member of government arguing for the motion and outlining why government should prosecute juvenile felons as adults. She mentioned that crime is always a crime and consequences are always the same regardless of the exact age of the criminal. I see almost all the lights have been switched on. The exact number is 43, so over 80% of our audience judges agreed with the member of government. Okay, let's move on to the member of opposition. Let's see if you can beat that score. 43 out of 50. Please step up to the podium.
Honorable adjudicators and fellow audiences, we as an opposition today are not denying the fact that any kinds of crimes or felonies are bad. However, due to the special characteristics of the juveniles, we believe that the two groups of criminals are separated for a reason. And thankfully, at the beginning of the debate, the Prime Minister have already admitted the fact that the juveniles are not mature enough to make any decisions. So before I go on to my argumentation, I would like to make some 3 points before my previous speaker. First, the Prime Minister have mentioned about the attempt of the rape done by the 18-year boy. However, we do not believe that the 18-year boy is fully aware of the possible consequences afterwards, such as pregnant, because as the Prime Minister mentioned, they are not mature enough. However, we believe that if the teenagers are not fully aware of how to deal with their sexual attempts, it is a government's job. It is our job to let them know how their sexual attempts can be negatively affect to our society. And secondly, we would like to further explain about the education that the opposition side has kept mentioning on. We believe that the education in the jail, in the status quo, the juveniles are already getting an education from the specialist about the social effects of their crimes, about these things. And since these educations are very constantly and continuously adopted, we believe that this education indeed make an efficient job to rehabilitate the criminals if they are juveniles. Secondly, we believe that if the opposition side, the government side has mentioned that as the felonies such as killing people is too significant to handle as a mild crime. The juveniles are already aware that their action is bad. However, there is a real-world example that a year ago, a young elementary school boy dropped his brick from the rooftop. However, it is just because of his attempt that he wanted to do the experience that he learned from his science class. However, unfortunately, there was a woman giving food to the cat, so the woman died. We believe that this is not the consequence of the juvenile's bad and harmful intention. To go on to my argument, we believe that the government's job is, yes, indeed to punish criminals. However, we strongly believe that much more valuable duty of the government is to rehabilitate their people, especially juveniles. As the word juveniles inform us, children aged under the 14 are still young. Therefore, government should be extremely careful if not to give a social stigma to them. If children are jailed right away by their one-time crime,
please,
it meant yes.
Either way in this debate, these juvenile felons will be able to be given a second chance and a chance to be educated. What do you think about this?
Are you saying that this debate is nothing about giving a second chance or not?
No, I'm saying that either way, in this debate, all these felons will be able to be given a second chance and an education. So why are you talking as if only your method is the able way to give these people an education?
Because at least I believe that it is the government's job to educate them before they give a strong sentence to the juveniles who are still young and who have the opportunities in their future. So to go on, their opportunities can be hugely influenced by the single conviction. So what the government doing now is too extreme. We believe the current Juvenile Protection Act is doing well, providing the right measure for the children. Because even the Juvenile Protection Act is made to protect children. Children who did felons are judged in the criminal trial as well as adults. And also, we believe that it is an undeniable fact that juveniles are more vulnerable to get into the crime. So what they need is protection and education. And that's the exact purpose of Juvenile Protection Act in the status quo. That law is guaranteeing the children's opportunities in the future to be aware of social influence of their actions and be the right adult in the future. And this process is crucial and fundamental, ladies and gentlemen. We believe that this is how to handle the criminal actions, because harsh persecution is just a one-time measure, removing all of the opportunities of the juveniles in the future. Thank you.
Okay, that was a member of opposition arguing against the motion, and according to the speaker, you may step down. The government's duty to rehabilitate juvenile delinquents is perhaps more valuable than the government's duty to punish juvenile delinquents. Okay, time to check the audience response. A bit under half, 22 out of 50, so just under half of our audience judges agree. Time already for the last speaker of the government bench, the government whip. Please step up to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, juvenile law was created to deal with actions and well-beings of a person who is not yet adult. However, ladies and gentlemen, the current state quo clearly proves that opposite to the fundamental purpose of this law, the circumstances that we face today is detrimental. And we think it is a tragedy that there are some juvenile felons that actually take advantage of these laws and commit more serious crimes, and as a result cause a vicious cycle that can both affect them, but to the society as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have advocated many times, no matter what crime, crime is a crime. And especially when it comes to felony, a crime that's utterly serious, we believe that we should focus on preventing and consider the social effects it can cause rather than the numerical age of the criminal. Today, the government side team's stance is simple, that we should prosecute juvenile felons as adults, and so to prevent them from causing further crimes. And we feel that it is very irresponsible of the opposition side against this motion without providing any sufficient alternatives as to lower the crime rates and change of social atmosphere. And before going on to any clashes, I would like to first rebut to what the opposition has talked about today. Now, what they've talked about is that if we are treated as adults, if they are treated same as adults, they will commit more crimes, saying that they will have more interaction with the gangs and so on. However, I'd like to give rebutts on 2 points of analysis. First, if they commit felons such as rape or murder and get away with it without getting much punishment, we believe that this will lead to more crimes because they will believe that they can get away with it with 2 or 1 week of punishment and get away with it with, even though the problem is very serious. And second, if they're sequestered from other harmful causes, we believe that this isn't a real problem to be considered. And now, what they've talked about is that the treatment, as same as the adults, will deprive the hopes of the felons. However, ladies and gentlemen, also 2 points of analysis here. First, the opposition side is solely considering from the perspective of the felons. However, ladies and gentlemen, we advocate that we should also regard the perspective of the plaintiffs that were actually harmed by the murders or the crimes that they have committed. When the adolescent felons commit crimes against them, their hopes are deprived as well as their lives. And the rest of their life will be, they can live the rest of their life with traumas and etc. And we believe that we should also consider the plaintiff's perspective. Second, about the young adults. Now, young adults who also have many days left ahead of them are also punished as adults. And we believe that they fail to address the equality and fairness as well as the adolescents and adults aged as 21 or 22 or more, who still have many days left in front of them. And they have talked about that adolescents aren't mature enough. However, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the opposition side today is very naive, because if the adolescents commit felony, we believe that they are mature enough to sink in the consequences of their acts. And plus, they've also talked about the true purpose of punishments, and it is not to cut off the hopes of the students in the future. However, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that they should be punished as well as adults, as adults, along with the sufficient education, rather than letting them slip away with 2 weeks or even no punishment at all when they have committed serious crimes such as murder or rape. So, and if they are so immature as the opposition advocate, we believe that they won't suddenly regret their mistakes, and suddenly be rehabilitated just because they got away with no punishment at all. Yes.
I would like to inform you that even if there are juveniles, if they did the felons like murder, they are already in the status quo judged in the criminal trial. What do you think about this point?
since I'll briefly just rebut to that case. Ladies and gentlemen, as we have seen in the current status quo, the current education system that treats the juvenile criminals aren't sufficient enough to make them actually be rehabilitated. So what we're advocating is that we should also punish them as well as providing sufficient education to actually make them a part of the society in the future. And so, ladies and gentlemen, today, the government side, we have analyzed the debate today from the view of felony and the people that suffer from these serious crimes and also the society. Plus, we have also addressed the problem of the efficiency. We've advocated that the current education system isn't sufficient enough to actually rehabilitate these kind of criminals. And we have given them alternatives such as education plus punishment, which will be much more effective rather than just education that does not have fundamental effects in this case today. And we believe that the alternatives that the government side today has provided will, in the end, benefit both felonies and the societies as a whole. And with these reasons, we're proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, that was the government whip arguing for the motion, and he highlighted in his argument that adult trials often lead to longer and harsher punishments, which mean that that punishment is more effective at preventing recidivism. I'm seeing that almost all the lights have been switched on, so let's find out the exact number, 44 out of 50. So that brings a total to 87 out of 100 for the closing government. Well done. All right, last speaker of the debate, the opposition whip. Please step up to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen and honorable adjudicators, what comes in mind when you hear the word juvenile? Yes, they are both mentally and physically immature, and it is the role of the government to rehabilitate and educate these children. The teenage brain is like a car with a good accelerator under poor control, but with a weak brake. With powerful impulses under poor control, the likely result is a crash. Let's go back to 2010 when a pregnant woman was found dead in her room. Surprisingly, the murderer was an 11-year-old boy, the son of the victim's fiancé, a boy who was, according to his acquaintance, was very smiley. According to his lawyer, he is still unable to grasp the magnitude of what has happened to him. Ladies and gentlemen, these are teenagers. Once again, we're not denying the fact that felony or any crime they did is bad, but what they need is change, which is the crucial and essential role of the government. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are here to talk about the motion that this House should prosecute juvenile felons as adults, and we strongly oppose to this statement. Before I go on to my points, I want to elaborate to the POI that the government side has asked to our speaker that unfortunately in this society there is a thing called branding theory, which means that students will not receive second chances because of the wrongdoings they did when they were still very immature. And this is very severe because the juveniles were still immature, as the Prime Minister has stated in his speech. So now let me go on to my points. Firstly, the proposition team said that the punishment was not strong enough. Today here we had a very irresponsible government, a government that said instead of giving new chances to juveniles, stated that they should have harsher statements to children. Unfortunately, they could not prove, firstly, how harsher sentences could lessen the rate of crime, and secondly, why the government is not giving enough education and rehabilitation program to students, which is actually the most crucial thing in the long term, as these children are the future of this generation. To further talk about rehabilitation education, as we stated before, this is not simple education, but education that is done continually and systematically for the sake of the students and for their future, which is very crucial. Also, there was a severe contradiction in the words of the proposition team. They said that they continually stated that the students are both immature and mature, which is a very severe contradiction. And secondly, they talked about how these crimes are not simple crimes, but felons. Yes, once again, we're not denying the fact that what the juveniles did was bad. But let us think about why felonies happen. And mostly it is because of the external environments that these children are in, or because they are not educated enough. But they are still very vulnerable from the external influences.
So also, as the Prime Minister thankfully stated, the students are still immature and it's the role of the adults and the government to teach them. What we want to say is that it is very irresponsible for the government to wholly pass away the crime to the children without including the environment and influences that the students receive. No, thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, once again, we're not denying the fact that what the juveniles did was bad, and of course they should receive the consequences. But it is very severe for them to take away the lifelong opportunities of the students because of the wrongdoings when they were immature. Thank you.
There are still 1 minute and 15 seconds left, so would you like to raise your POI again?
With the current education system not efficient enough to actually address the problems of the criminals, what are the alternatives that the opposition side advocate? With the current education system that is not efficient enough to address the current criminals, adolescents criminal, what are the alternatives that the opposition side provide us today?
Can you say that again? I couldn't understand it clearly.
What the opposition side advocate today is that we should give them education rather than punishment, right?
Yes. No, we said it that they should receive the consequences, but they should also get enough education for the future.
However, if that thing is not sufficient in the current status quo, and what are the alternatives that the opposition side provide today to actually enhance this situation?
Sorry, it's out of order.
Okay.
Okay, that was the opposition whip arguing against the motion, so arguing the government should not prosecute juvenile felons as adults. And in laying out the reasons why, she mentioned that juveniles are impulsive and that treating them as adult felons would harm future opportunities such as job prospects. Okay, not too many lights have been switched on. 5, so just 10% of our audience judges agreed with the opposition whip, and that brings the total to 27 for the closing opposition team. All right, all 8 speakers have spoken. While the judges are making their final decision, let's get some audience feedback. Audience judges, if you agree with the government bench, if you think that juvenile felons should be prosecuted as adults, please switch your lights on. If you agree with the opposition bench, please leave your lights off. Okay, on the count of 3, make your final decision. 1, 2, 3. Just from a quick scan, I'm seeing that almost all the lights have been turned on. So let's find out the exact number. 44 for and 6 against the motion. So it looks like the government bench did a better job at persuading our audience. Now I'd like to ask our 3 adjudicators for their opinions on today's debate. Professor Jan Gallis.
So for the closing government, I thought you guys were the most comprehensive in today's debate. You were able to talk about the effects of society, effects of young adults, as well as to the victims. I think this was the nice thing that you've done. But I think we need to work more on making sure that we get to show the comparative of your arguments. So there was a lot of complaints about, oh, there are a lot of negative effects to the victims in the status quo. And second, perhaps we can also work on your structure. Because like you wanted to almost discuss all stakeholders in today's debate. But I felt to me that it was just like all over the place. A good structure would actually help you.
So I'll focus my comments on the closing opposition. I thought you did a good job in broadening the number of issues being discussed on the opposition side. In terms of the opposition whip, 2 new things that you brought to the mix was this issue of branding and the issue of what causes crime in the first place, social context and other societal environmental factors. Now, again, on the opposition side, you had this issue of confusion, perhaps, with respect to age. That there was, you gave an example of an 11-year-old boy, which I think many of us could really clearly understand the point you were trying to make. But again, when we talk about juvenile crimes and juvenile punishment, we're often talking about older teenagers, right? I mean, most of us instinctively understand that there's a reason to treat a 9, 10, 11-year-old differently. But for a 17, 18-year-old, like the example that the PM gave, well, that's kind of, as my co-members of the panel had pointed out, the meat of the issue. So I wish you had discussed that also.
So comments about the closing half debate and the debate as a whole. I felt that both closing teams did provide some good extensions, meaning that you're taking some original ideas that come out in the opening half and developing them further, or taking a slightly new track in terms of discussing them. Closing government went deeper into the nature of felony. You did, of course, bring in some additional arguments such as deterrence, waste of resources, and victim-centered approach. But again, I felt that it's a consistent line of argumentation with opening government. Same thing with closing opposition. You're taking the idea of developmental aspects of children, psychology, and education that opening opposition talked about, but slightly differently with the role of government as your center of approach. I felt that both closing government and closing opposition did a good job in this regard, but I would say that the closer debate ends up becoming between opening opposition and closing opposition. So I'd like to make that as a comparison to a certain extent.
Okay, thank you for your feedback. All right, it's time for me to announce the top 2 teams of today's debate. They will be moving on to the semi-final round of this tournament. So, the top 2 teams are Daeil Foreign Language High School and Gwacheon Foreign Language High School. Congratulations! You guys look really surprised. How do you feel?
I thought the win-loss was depend on the team, so yeah, I was quite surprised, but I'll do our best in our semifinals. Thank you for your kind comments too.
What about you?
I felt the same. This is a very unique opportunity, so I wanted to learn more and do debate with other great students. And I think it's a great opportunity. I'll try my best in the semifinals also.
Okay, I hope so too. All right, and Daeil students, how did you feel about today's debate?
First, we want to say thank you to all the judges and the beautiful MC and the contestants who were so passionate in this debate. And we promise to show you our best in the semifinal.
As you might have noticed, you guys won the most number of green lights from our audience judges. Did that encourage you for the government whip?
Well, being too focused in my speech, I didn't really realize that the audience has voted for me. But since I found out that many of the audiences have voted for me, I would like to express my gratitude towards the audience judges.
All right, congratulations. And you guys are both 10th graders, so just from an experience level, you guys would be naturally less experienced than the other students who are 11th and 12th graders. As the judge mentioned, your speeches were a little bit short. Was that on purpose?
We were we didn't manage the time. We weren't really good at organizing stuff.
Right. Did you guys have enough to say, or?
No, we didn't. We thought we had enough information, but we didn't.
I think that's for him, not me. I just hope it would have been better if I had more time to check on my informations, because we worked on his one more.
Okay. So more time to prepare on your particular speech. Okay. All right. And how did you guys feel about today's debate?
I felt like I could kind of tell that these 2 teams won because the whip of the government and these 2 people, they were really good at engaging in the debate, and I think I learned a lot from them.
All right.
I really appreciate for having me here, and I think it's a very wonderful experience to have a chance to speak here and share opinions with other contestants, so I really appreciate it.
Okay, well, regardless of the results, congratulations and thank you to all 8 students. Well done for your efforts today. Intelligence High School Debate aims to change the world through the insight of our talented high school students. That's all the time we have left for today. Next week, we have the very final episode of the preliminary round, so please don't miss that. We'll see you next week. Thank you and goodbye.